Welcome back to Time to Change. I'm Chasen Forehand.
And I'm Dom Jones.
And we're having discussions with people doing the work.
Yeah, and that work is a result of some deep lived experience, some knowledge, but ultimately a passion to see better humans and better workplaces.
I love that. And I can't wait to dive in.
Let's do it.
Welcome back to Time to Change. I'm Chasen Forehand, and my handsome co-host Dom is on his way. We can't wait, though. This is a fantastic day, and I'm here with two incredible human beings that you know, but I'm going to introduce the first one. The lady next to me is Nicole Angai-Galindo. She is the founder of Guiding Brilliant Writers, LLC, the publishing company. She is a writer, an author. She is a publisher. She's a fantastic human being. My wife and I loved spending time with her and her husband, Marcos, recently. And she's got one of her authors in the house today. So, Nick, give it up.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for having me on, for having Jack on. And I don't just have one of my authors. I have the very first client of Guiding Brilliant Writers when we went LLC just about 6 months ago. All my authoring has been anthologies. He is my first solo author, and it has been an incredible journey between the two of us. He's aspiring for his dreams, as am I. We're building alongside each other. And what's coming today, it's just crazy because we're talking the 7th month mark in this month. And this is his 3rd release.
Wow.
So that's right. And it started with a trilogy. And I'll let him talk more about that. But Jack Torrance, of course, is an alias. And Brian will share, that's his real name, I'm sure, a bit about that. So Brian, Jack, is actually in the finance industry. He works for a very reputable, well-known company. I'm not going to say who. He also has his degree in psychology. So when you consider that he is a psychological thriller author, and I want to say intense psychological thriller, like on the edge of, really stepping into that sci-fi, almost unbelievable, but it's true.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to introduce Brian Jack. I call him Brian Jack, but to everyone, he's JT.
Whether you're a nonprofit, church, school, or business, let ourmerchpage.com become an extension of your marketing team. They'll handle the design, sourcing, fulfillment, and management of your merchandise marketing needs so you can stay focused on what matters most, your business.
All right. Let's give it up, folks. Great to have you in the house. I'm a fan, and my wife and I think of Stephen King, people like that when I think of you and how you write. It's really, really outstanding work. And so, the very first thing that I want to know, and then we want to talk about, is why come out with your identity? Why not stay as Jack Torrance? Why are you coming out with your identity and sharing that with the audience?
Yeah, Jason, it's a great question, and I thought about this. Why now, right? Why reveal now? And it takes me back to my youth, my childhood. For a long time, I hid behind my journals, my writing, my dark thoughts, not so much out of shame, but really out of survival. Being anonymous, obscure, gave me the freedom to write what I call the unspeakable, bleeding truth on the page without being feared of judgment. But looking back into my childhood, I realized that writing as a teenager was really the first mask I ever wore. And by the time I got into adulthood, I sometimes feel like I'm still stuck in those times. And the more I wrote, the more I realized a commonality in my stories, and that is the pain, sometimes the madness that I experienced in my childhood from childhood stories that I'll share in a moment. can be found in a way on the pages of the silent canvas, and even in my short stories, When Horror Stares Back. I realized they weren't just stories, they were echoes from my own experiences. They enduring significant traumatic ordeals, mostly in high school, some in middle school, what I call the formative years. It was like carrying a wound that I couldn't heal fully, but it always remembers, And when you're young, you realize when you get older that your world was a bit torn in half. And I never really knew exactly what to make of that. So when I write, it brings me back to that place. So the reveal is something about this felt like I was pretending, like I was hiding behind Jack Torrance in a mask, and being someone else began to feel dishonest. Not so much to you or the public, but to me. In the past year, I've been writing under this pen name, as Nick just mentioned, Jack Torrance. He's a famous, fictional, and deeply disturbing, haunting persona that maybe some of you know, speaking of Stephen King from The Shining. But it allowed me to delve into the darkest corners of my mind and what I call the murky recesses of the human psyche.
Wow.
The silent canvas, it grew from this, and as I connected more and more to readers, they let me know that they connected deeply to the emotional truth of the book. I realized that these stories were not just born from fiction and fantasy, dark fantasy and sinister fiction, but from me, within me, actually, Brian Bothe. And these stories and words often come from the years of bullying, overcoming the psychological damage with being different, with being labeled as learning disabled and deficient, and emotionally crawling up from that dark place when I was too young to make sense of it. So revealing my identity is not so much about abandoning the pen name. Jack Torrance will always be the voice that I want to channel the horror through, the beauty and the brokenness of my characters. But it felt like the right time for this reveal to share the human behind the words, especially excellent timing considering the recent release of the anthology, We Choose to Be More Than Our Diagnosis. It felt right to honor the vulnerability within me to my readers. So I decided to reveal who Jack really is. I reasoned and concluded that if I'm asking my readers to face their darkness, to stare into their grief, madness, and pain, then I owe them my truth in return. So I made the choice. I took the risk. I stepped out behind the fictional guise and covered facade and let people know that I'm Brian Bothe. Jack Torrance is my voice, but this is my heart. It isn't a farewell to Jack, it's a fusion. I am Jack Torrance, the horror author, and together we have many stories to share, unmasked, united, and unafraid to write what still haunts us all.
Wow. Wow. It makes complete sense to me. And after, being a fan of your first book, I've got it right here. And, at the time when this goes out to the public, you're going to have released your second book, your Silent Canvas 2. So here's the first one. And I can't wait. By the time people get to see this, they're going to be able to get that right there. And they can scan that QR code right above Nick's left shoulder and get their own copy of the Silent Canvas 2. Show that book again. This is fantastic. So we're going to put both of these up here. Look at this. This is the first one. Fantastic. There's the second one right there. The videos and everything leading up to this is just phenomenal. So, I mean, it sets up really the second question for me is, hey, when you were writing this, the first one, did you already have in your head like two, and what does that look like? Like, what did that end up being for you? Was that already prepped and you were planned to do that?
It's such a great question, and I'll tell you, it's a profound one and an oddly complex one. So if you'll indulge me, it'll take me a few minutes to articulate this.
Absolutely.
But
Go
the
ahead.
honest answer is it's really both. Let me start by saying that I didn't plan for this series to be a full trilogy from the start. But the story demanded that I did. When I wrote the first Silent Canvas, I was diving headfirst into manic preoccupation. For those that know the story, they see the distress and the control from various characters, different perspectives, completely consumed by Natalie's trauma, her utter vulnerability, by Ulrich's masterful manipulation and his magnetic grip of her. I like to think of it as a slow burn of colliding forces, the two of them. This
Yep.
book highlights an almost beautiful erosion of trust and selfhood, right? The story, it weaves, as many have said, a tale of dark romance is a great way to put it. Love and attraction become indistinguishable from obsession and deadly attachment, possession, which hollows you out like a parasite and leaves you for nothing. So I thought to myself, you know what, this is the canvas one. There's definitely more to it. As I was putting truth onto every page and I reached the final chapters, I could sense there was something pulsing more beneath, unresolved, haunting, unfinished. I knew early on in the Silent Canvas one that Ulrich and Natalie, they weren't just characters, they were forces disintegrating and collapsing on one another. I had a general sense that Natalie and Ulrich's arc wasn't going to end with the first book. There was always the weight of their connection, the deepness, the darkness, unspoken, a lingering sense that, it's not finished. It's still there to haunt you, me, the readers. But I knew there was more to explore. I just didn't have it mapped out yet. Didn't quite have it mapped out yet. But I will say this, that when I began writing the Silent Canvas 2, it started to come together almost organically, like the story had been waiting for me to return. It's almost like it wrote itself, which is really an odd thing. In the first page of the Silent Canvas 1, I pinned, the canvas was never blank. It was always waiting. So candidly, I did not have two fully laid out, but I did have fragments, emotional elements, movements, detailed graphic, unsettling imagery, the continuation that would dive deeper into Natalie's ongoing legacy and descent into madness that Ulrich left behind. The two is not just a sequel, it's an aftershock, it's a descent, it's a reckoning, right? I didn't really outline it, but it came together kind of on its own. I sensed the grief, the madness, and the shadowy remnants of what Ulrich left just had to be, it demanded to be told. I know the readers felt like, what's next? There was a kind of a hunger from the reader of, I want to know what's happening. Natalie can't just be left here knowing she's pregnant with Ulrich's baby after the end of one. I've got to know what's coming. So from this psychological depth, this moral ambiguity, I realized the story had really just begun. This twisted love devotion of the three, Ulrich, Natalie, and even Natalie's daughter, how that comes to play in the sequel. By the time I had finished the Silent Canvas 2, I realized this wasn't just a series, it was an emotional and psychological symphony. It was the shaping of an epic trilogy about the inheritance of pain, madness, the roles that fate and destiny play, the seductive, perverse devotion of these characters, the monsters that we all birth in silence through our multi-generational trauma. That's how 3 was born. And now I can't imagine the Silent Canvas series without all 3 installments. It'd be disingenuous, Jason, to say that I knew it was going to be a series or even a trilogy. But as I kept going, there was no way for it to stop. And once I understood what Silent Canvas was truly about as a series, there was no question. It had always been a trilogy in disguise, a psychological opera, as my father calls it, a study in obsession, an inheritance of psychosis, and the monstrous beauty of devotion. It's the purge you'll see from the character once you get to 3, the purge of rage, grief, madness, all weaponized through the legacy of their son, this fellow named Elric. So in conclusion to your question, I didn't realize that on the first page of the Silent Canvas that I was standing on the precipice of the abyss, hanging over the edge of madness with a surgically terrifying masterpiece. But that's what I had. And this thing cuts right through with unflinching precision. From that inception, the Silent Canvas 1 would spawn a trilogy that spans the full spectrum of the human soul in our deepest desires, deepest despairs, and most dangerous wants and needs. It's both philosophically existential and psychologically challenging. It's a crucible where egocentric anger meets psychological collapse. It's a study in the void where madness and our soul's deterioration converge in exquisite pain and ruin, often leading the reader unsettling questions about life's meaning, our purpose here on earth, our sacred freedoms, our soul's identity, our fragile morality, and our personal choices. The Silent Canvas, it's an act of a single fractured consciousness. Identity crumbles, faith is deformed, Salvation wears the mask of annihilation, where trauma is transformed into art and shaped by our hand, where souls tortured turn grief, fear, and pain into something profound and horrifyingly beautiful. What I offer the reader is a truly emotionally raw performance.
Oh my goodness. That's absolutely fantastic. And this pause allows me to bring in our fantastic co-host. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the stage. The man, the myth, the legend, Dom Jones is in the house.
Hello, Dom. Great to see you
Oh
again.
That is
my goodness.
that is one heck of an intro, Jason. Man,
No, well, hey, you missed the first part, so I had to bring you in somehow. So you know what? We have Jack Torrance in the house, and Nick. You remember Jack, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't gotten the first one yet, we're going to include that in the credits with all the other links to Jack and Nick. But above Nick's shoulder, go ahead and scan that QR code and get the silent canvas too. And you know, there we go. Hold that up again. Get your copy today. It's out. You're going to love this. If you haven't read the first one, get both of them. And that sets up the next question. And Dom, I'm gonna go ahead and ask that while you catch up. But the next question is, in case I'm a reader that's just coming into this, do I need to purchase the Silent Canvas 1 before I read that before I read Silent Canvas 2?
Yeah, it's a really interesting, good question. You can definitely start with Canvas 2. It drops you straight in the aftermath of Canvas 1, where you start to see the real unravelings beginning for Natalie. But if you want to feel the full weight of what Natalie has lost and, of course, what she is becoming, I certainly recommend you start with book 1. The good news is the first Silent Canvas is available on audiobook as well as the paperback and ebook. So you can catch up really fast and fully feel the full weight of the psychological tension and the intimacy, the haunting of Silent Canvas 1 that sets the stage for 2. You mentioned the Silent Canvas 3 a moment ago, and that is going to be coming out in appropriately dark fashion for true horror and psychological thriller fans on October 31st, which is, of course,
Wow.
Halloween night. Um,
Wow. Of this year?
Yeah,
yes,
massive
yeah.
this year. He has me
Holy
under pressure.
As is under pressure. That's right. And this will definitely be the darkest, most unflinching installment yet. It's really the culmination of everything that I've put forward so far. I do want to warn readers, however, that to prepare yourself. This final act doesn't just close the story, it truly detonates it. I want fans to know they need to brace themselves. Canvas 3 is not the end of just an epic saga trilogy. It unleashes it, it devours what comes before. It'll leave you behind and never let you go. It's going to drag your soul over hot lava coals like a ferocious predator in its jaws, burns the canvas to ash, and leaves only silence. The kind of silence that's going to crawl into your skin and watches you back. It tears through your flesh and memory alike, bleeding through your bone, bearing any sort of mercy along with it. And when it ends, you won't be the same, and neither will the silence at nighttime when it leaves. I truly, Jason, I want to tell you, I'm ecstatic and so proud of the work I've done on all three, and 3 is my masterpiece. I tell you, Dom, this final act is not an ending, it's a reckoning, it's a requiem, it's a resurrection in blood. It will not ask for your permission. It will crawl inside of you and it will make itself a home. It won't knock, it's going to enter loudly, rattling your nerves and rattling your soul, and it's going to hollow out its name as something unholy. It's going to leave you to worship the ruin. And when it's done, you'll thank it for the wreckage and you'll be left wanting more.
Oh my goodness. That was a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I need to have Jack write my biography.
Happy to do it.
Oh my
Me too.
goodness. I can't work on his stuff at night. Just so you
Yeah.
know. I have to have full daylight, and there are even certain times where
Uh,
when my husband's here with me, I will stop working on his stuff. Or I have to stop and go work on something that's like totally opposite, because it really it gets its claws into you, until you're not even in this space anymore. I'm telling you, it's
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
that level of writing.
Wow. You clearly have a gift with words and painting vivid imagery with your
Oh, thank you.
words. And I was a huge fan of your discipline to it, it, you've put some amazing work into your writings. If I'm not mistaken, that is how many books this year? This puts you at?
Well, it'll be four in October. This will be the third next on Thursday. Silent Canvas 2 Thursday will be the third book with Nick and
Okay.
myself.
Okay.
Canvas 1, When Horror Stares Back, and Canvas 2 so far.
Okay. Dare I ask what else is on the docket that we can expect from you in the future, and how can our listeners keep up to date with what you have going on?
Sure, sure. Well, I do have a number of drafts, just more or less ideas. I've already written a book that came before all of these, and it was just, I wrote it to see what do I think about my own writing, since I haven't written in years, since my high school days, and wrote a book that I never published when I was 29. And it was a romance. I just wanted to write a romance. And then Canvas 1 kind of came from that, totally different characters. But I realized that I can twist that story and make it very horrific. So that I've got that already written. I just need to change it a bit because it's very romantic. Young woman falls in love with older guy, billionaire kind of guy. So it's a love story. It's very romantic. I would call it sappy. I can easily change that and do want to do that. I've also written this deeply philosophical book, which I'm going to title likely The Big Monkey. And the overview is about a CEO, a pharmaceutical CEO, and he creates a drug in a post apocalyptic world. It's dystopian vibe and feel. And essentially, the drug eliminates, cancels, or erases kind of the soul, but dreams, the ability to fear, to feel, and also the ability to really sleep. So then there's kind of these mindless zombies that go through life, and then he becomes his own biggest addict, and he starts to mentally believe he's the big monkey. And Simeon Rex is a Latin phrase for the monkey king. So the book will be called The Big Monkey, the Simeon Rex. And there's some other ideas floating around. So there's probably another 4 or 5 books in the works for next year.
God,
Oh my
my
goodness.
imagination is. Thank you for asking the question, by the way. I am his publisher, and I'm assuming I'll still be his publisher next year. I'm just trying to get through the 4 books this year. I didn't even ask what's on the docket for next year yet. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Now
I
you
guess
know. Now you know. Now
Sounds
you
like
know.
y'all are going to be busy. All right.
It's gonna be a wild ride.
And
So
I do think the number one book that I'd really like to focus on after Big Monkey will be the return of Elric Thorne, because there's the potential that he could return. So that's also in the works. That would be Silent Canvas 4, because it doesn't necessarily end with 3. It just gets real horrific after 3 and
oh
becomes truly a psychological and maybe even a supernatural thriller, which the other 2 books never quite went there.
oh my goodness. Well, I can't even believe that we're already out of time. But man, make sure you scan that QR code above Nick's shoulder. Get your copy of Silent Canvas 2. Get your copy of Silent Canvas 1 as well. And we'll be on the lookout for all the other books Jack Torrance is putting out today. Man, what a great time. And thank you so much for being on the show. Nick, always great to see you. And Dom, good to have you in the house, my friend. Good to have you in the house. Thanks for showing up, everybody. We'll catch you next time. This has been Time to Change. I'm Chasing Forehand,
And I'm Dom Jones.
and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for shopping. Thanks for shopping. I'm going to cut that out for sure.